Welcome everyone. The first item with no apologies. The next item is, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest that need to be noted? Outside those that we're aware of? No? Okay. There are no matters lying on the table. So I now invite Peter Newport. And Peter, you've got 3 minutes.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you, committee members, for your time this morning. The good news is I'm only going to take about 60 seconds or less. I edit a local news platform called Crux, and we reach between 10 and 20,000 people a day. So we're very proud of the level of community engagement that we have. The reason for me being here today is that I wanted to table some questions for each of you as committee members, just to canvass your views on mainly the Lakeview project, but just also one question on the issue of procurement, one on council overheads. The other reason that I wanted to table these questions today is that we did a survey back in mid-June on the question of Lakeview governance, and we were very pleased to get over 100 written comments. And again, one of the reasons I'd like to speak to you personally is really to ask you to just take a few minutes to read these comments. The people who wrote the comments took the time to submit them. I think they're pretty well thought out, whether they agree with the change or review of governance of Lakeview or not. I think both sides of the argument are very clearly written. So Sarah Brady has hard copies of the survey as well as the questions, and Sarah also will have an email version to forward to members who are not here today. So I'm not here to express any opinions, just to really table the questions and really ask you in the strongest possible terms to take time to read the comments in the survey. And that these are unedited and they're completely as received, both in support of and against a change in the Lakeview governance. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. 1 minute, 50 seconds.
Perfect.
Okay, we'll get underway. The agenda, just the confirmation without addition or alteration. So I'll move that the agenda be confirmed. Got a seconder?
One second.
Sorry, okay, thank you. The next item is the confirmation of the public minutes of the meeting on the 14th of March. We've got a mover for the, just bearing in mind that there's been a tidy up in the language in the minutes and they were recirculated. Has everyone received those?
Yes, I think they've all been circulated, Stuart, and just our apologies that was clearly an early draft of the minutes. They weren't complete, they weren't well written, and apologise that those original ones got circulated, and acknowledge that the final version was circulated to you last night.
Just down there, Mr. Chair, because I only got them last night, I'm still working off the earlier version. So the changes are editorial, are they? Things like ports, change to port and things?
Yes, so tidying up some of the early language in those, yeah.
Okay.
So we've got a mover for those minutes.
I'm happy to move.
Yeah, thank you. Nikki, yep. And
I'll second that. Lisa.
And we've got Lisa, you're going to second?
Yes,
All those in favour?
Aye.
Carry. Thank you. Right, move to the risk and compliance update. So I'll ask Gareth to come forward.
Morning, Chair, members of the committee. Through you, Chair, this report is the regular update of the risk and compliance function, which is a relatively new function as we talked to last time I came to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee. The report template is a standard structure. I'm happy to take you through some of the key items or happy to take the report as read and answer questions, whichever is your preference, Chair.
Well, I'm happy to take it as read, and then to open it up to questions from members. Are there any questions?
Yeah, just yeah, good report. I just one of the things that comes out, I'm just trying to flick my way through it. We talk about lots of the risk and various levels of risk. One of the other risks that we don't seem to address sometimes is the risk of being too risk averse. And I'm just wondering whether that should be addressed in here. We have got examples. We've got the recent review of the planning and development department, where maybe too much peer reviewing. So I would call that sort of a risk averseness. And the risk of that is the impact on some projects slowing down, getting the work done, escalating in costs. So you got any comment on that? That should be included in here.
Through you, Chair, yes, happy to respond to that. As the report indicates, we intend to do a review of our risk management policy, and our approach to risk in terms of appetite and tolerance is a core component of that. My view would be is we would not normally, or it would be unusual to have a risk on your risk register that identifies potentially you being as risk averse, but it's appropriate for us to review that through our review of risk management policy and incorporate a risk appetite component to that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay.
Happy obviously to consider a risk of that basis if you feel it's necessary, but it would be unusual for us to have that on a risk register.
Mr. Chair, one of the areas, the high level ones, was emergency management, and this has been raised by the Wanaka Community Board also. You've mentioned it here, there's a bit of detail here. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but I think what we're wanting to see, whether this is the right forum to raise it, is the need to see something action. And I know you do have they do have exercises on that, but just to get that confidence that all this detail here of the structure and the organisation with the regional council, that it does actually work. And we have got the people ready to go. So I'm just raising it here as you've raised it in this one of the key risk areas.
That's Mr. Chair, if I could talk to that. I mean, obviously, as you know, emergency management functions are provided, through the Otago Regional Council, and they obviously have staff that work closely with QLDC staff, and we've done a lot of work as council to actually improve the amount of coverage that ORC have in the Upper Clutha. In fact, we lobbied ORC a number of years ago to secure some extra resources. So we're very mindful of the Upper Clutha, and certainly we can continue to talk to ORC around their program, delivery program. But I think we're confident as an emergency management function and as an EOC that we're well able to cope with anything from across the district.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes, Bill.
Yeah, I'm happy with proposed option 3 and the approach going forward. Probably one of the big risks with the council that's seen its workload grow exponentially like this council has is the risk that people look at risks in little boxes and silos. And I think probably the key thing that I thought was missing was just that sort of horizontal view of priorities in terms of, I think a lot of the risks sort of hinted at, but I think there probably needs to be explicit in terms of the process, at least, that when we look at risks, we look across the different council functions to pick up things you may miss if you look at them in isolation. And I think option 3 takes you down that route, but I'm just wondering in terms of the tier 1 risk, where there's something around strategic prioritisation that's missing, because all of these are quite functional and compartmentalised, but I think that's probably critical in terms of risk culture, that you're able to look across and join things up. And that's where risk can fall through cracks. But that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Happy to respond to that if it would be useful, Chair.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So Councillor Wong, that is a intended component of the way that we move our risk management framework. What we're proposing here is to move to a hierarchy, and the intent of that is to allow us to indicate connections between all of council responses and then individual responses that are needed across teams, across directives, etc. So there is an intention to look at interconnectivity, and one of the things that we're doing is incorporating that through a review of our risk management system, so our Tech One system. It is mentioned in the report, but I recognise we haven't used that term interconnectedness, but absolutely an intent for us to move in that direction.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments at all?
Yes, John, I have a few if that's okay. It's lucky.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Big report, and it was excellent. I really thought that the intent to integrate and to look across things like that, yeah, was excellent. I am just interested if you're talking about 200 to 300 tier 2 risks. I can't conceptualise or visualise how that Tech One system will make that work. So I think the intent is awesome, but it would be excellent to sort of understand a bit more. And I don't know if there's the opportunity to run like a demo of how it works, but it's just an idea. It would be useful to see how intent is going to work in practice at some point. Sorry, there's just a bit of advice that's been requested. In terms of the changes to council risk context, I just thought the Wanaka petition hadn't been added in there, and you've asked if there's anything else that should be considered. So I think there's a relationship and governance sort of reputational risk around that. So I thought it might be worth raising that. Next point, just on emergency management. I just noticed that there was no money set aside in the annual plan and the reserves, but if there was an event, and it's just an ongoing thing that's concerning me. So it would be great to see a report on that and how we would respond, recover from an event and what's been put in place to assist that. Sorry, I'm not sure if this is what you wanted from these reports. The fifth one was looking at the implications of the water reforms and then also an effective provision for P&D. And I guess what I wrote down was, how are we ensuring that our planning and development work aligns with the limitations in terms of investing in water infrastructure? Because there was a comment that it's likely this will significantly limit the ability to invest strategically in water assets, and yet we're doing a lot of forward planning on zoning, and Ladies Mile springs to mind. So I'm just interested in, I'll just raise it as something to be dealt with, but how do we manage the risk of how those things interact, I guess. Where else? And then we got to the proposed tier 1 risks, and it was really good to see an effective governance in there at 15. But there were 27 workshops held. None of the workshops were with councillors, and I'm just wondering if it would be useful to have a workshop with councillors to have a chat about the risks that they perceive in terms of the process that they experience and how that impacts on how they deliver governance. Because I think this captures some of the issues, but not all. And I think there may even be other issues that might be tier 1, might be tier 2, that we could raise and we could participate in that process, because we're often missing from those sorts of things. So I'd like to request that we have a workshop with councillors to see what risks they see should be be put in the register. I don't know whether that's something you could take on advice, or whether that's something that we need to make a motion on. Just a couple of other things. Risk of losing economic prosperity. I think in terms of looking at the interactions between the different risks, if we're looking at climate risk, but we're also trying to maintain levels of service and maintain prosperity, there's a bit of a tension there, I think, because to address climate, we may have to reduce levels of service, and we may have to take on some reduced economic prosperity. So I'm just, again, it's sort of to Bill's comment, how do they how do they interact and how do we resolve tensions between the different risks. And one last thing, sorry, I know it's long, at 9, we've sort of locked in a strategy. So, sorry, the risk is strategy, sorry, and we speak anyway, sorry, we speak to the spatial plan specifically and not being able to achieve that, but I would have thought that the spatial plan is a specific strategy that helps to achieve or to mitigate a risk. And so that the bigger risk, there's a bigger picture risk that sits underneath that. Sorry, I've just lost my place on the plan, on the section. Anyway, I just wouldn't want to lock not meeting a strategy and there's a risk because we have to be more flexible than that. Does that make sense? No.
Through you, Chair, yes, I understand what you're referring to, Councillor Gladding. What I'm not sure about is exactly which risk, I'm sorry, you're referring to. Risk 9, that's proposed in Tier 1 as strategy for growth fails to meet objectives.
Yeah, you're right. And the other bit is in the next box. Correct. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Gareth. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've got resolutions. 1, note the contents of this report, and 2 is to endorse the proposed Tier 1 risk. So I'm happy to move. And sorry, Nikki.
Sorry, it was just a point of clarification. I'm just wondering if Gareth would like it to be changed, the wording changed, because it looked like, as it was written, we're just endorsing the risks. But I think the intent was to implement the proposed risk hierarchy and proposed Tier 1 risks. Just looked like there was a difference, and that's your preference.
In terms of reference, obviously it is a management responsibility in terms of managing tiers. I do get the point in terms of tiers and proposed risks. I'm happy to have that amended if the committee feel that that's appropriate, but I'll leave that with you, Chair.
That's fine. I just took it from the report, so I thought there might have been a miss, but if there hasn't been, that's fine.
Not intentionally, I'm sorry,
No, that's fine. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, well, I've moved. We've got Lisa, you're seconding. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Thank you. Move next to the financial overview, debtors analysis and statement of financial position. So ask Patty if you can come forward.
Good morning all. So items 2 and items 3 are the regular finance updates. So item 2 is the April year-to-date financial overview, and item 3 being sensitive expenditure. Take the reports as read.
Yeah, and Patty, I thought that was a very good commentary as part of the package. So thank you.
So happy to take any questions.
So just for clarity, we'll deal with report 2 before we turn to report 3.
Yep.
I think Bill, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess the question I have for Patty, and it probably comes through the last paper on the agenda around Bancorp, is just where are we sitting in relation to our debt ceiling? Because there's this short-term perspective about how we're tracking this year versus through the next 3 to 4 years. And in terms of the government's changes to its water management reforms going from 4 to 10 entities, what is the implications of that for both our debt ceiling and our OPEX? So it's probably a bigger question than the paper itself, but just reading the paper, it sort of begged that question about just where are we sitting from a high level? Can you answer that, Patty, please?
I would be happy to answer that, Stuart, through you.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart.
Yes, Bill. The management of debt and our covenant restriction is something that's very front of mind for us at present as we move into the planning for our 10-year plan. So what we are doing is making sure that our capital program meets a baseline in terms of essential work in the first 3 years. So the assumption we're making with Three Waters is that we will carry those assets through until the end of the timetable for transition, which is 2026. So we're very aware of the need to manage our borrowings prudently. So we are in an active planning mode in terms of how we will go about that and reporting back to council through the steering groups for the long-term plan. But you're right, it's a challenge for us, and we will see some important prioritisation work having to be made in order to make sure we are delivering the most appropriate projects at the right time.
Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, too, Mr. Chair. Yeah, very good report. And this, I was going to raise it in the previous item, but it's the whole thing about the governance side of things is a lot of this stuff in this report. I don't know if we go into much detail here, or should we be going into detail with the relevant committees like infrastructure and other things like that. I know for other, like the community board and other councillors, some of the stuff in this report is very useful, and we've been crying out for a sort of I know lower level for the community board projects. Why don't we can pull this report and just a lot of, especially the list here of all the projects and where they're at. So it's very good. So it gets to the point of how do we make sure that we keep all the other elected members up to speed with what we're getting presented here. I know they can come along, they can read this agenda and that, but I was wondering is some of the other chairs of other committees will put together a summary for all councillors if there's anything to highlight. I'm just wondering whether we should be, and I just don't know right now whether how much detail we're going to. I've got comments or questions on things down in the spreadsheet, but should we be doing this here, or should this be happening somewhere else? Just in the detail of, I'm going to start talking about dollars and what happens if, for example, if approval not given for that's gone to a hearing for a wastewater plant and whatever and things like that. Those sort of level questions. I'm just trying to get an understanding, Mr. Chair, and bring around here what detail we go into here.
Well, the report is available to whoever would like to use it. It's a public report, so they can distribute it to committee chairs if you think that's useful. We are able to take questions at the table, and if we can't answer them immediately, we will provide the answers as a triage sort of approach. Okay. So the prime responsibility is this committee in terms of how we're tracking overall. For matters of detail, they may need to be referred to officers for response. So we can deal with it partially here, or we can distribute the questions. Okay.
Well, then at a higher level, there, paragraph 8 talks about the capital program. Just at a high level, we say we're tracking this is April, isn't it? End of April.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're 2 months behind. We're with the end of the financial year anyway. So how do we go? Can we update? Have we got an update? We got 64% at the end of April. We're aiming to get to 83% of the capital program. And just the high level stuff of how much we put into the plan and how much we put into the program and how much we can achieve looking forward to the next LTP. I just want to feel how we're sitting at the moment.
I don't know whether Paddy's got the update in terms of those the outturn. But
no, there's no update to the outturn, but
okay.
There's that, it is at record levels, I guess, that becomes the 194 million. Certainly a steep change from previous years. Obviously, the Alliance is playing a huge impact into that.
We will be able to report that actual towards the end of the month.
Yeah, just on paragraph 36, just from my education, a lot of the tracking there is year-to-date budget. For example, Project Pure 13.5 million, actual is 11.9 million. Does that indicate we're going to be we're not going to spend the full amount at the end of the full year budget? Or is that just at the end of April point of time, in the last couple of months, we're going to have a whole lot more expenditure? So, and all the way through there, all the actuals seem to be less than the budget at that point. Must be a good thing, but
well,
that tends to be the picture of all organisations, they have aspirations to spend capital, but it's implementing is always lags, in my view.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think one of the key things to note through there is that the projects are all in train. So yeah, there looks to have been some slippage either in timing or delivery, but the projects are there, they are being spent, and you'll note that a lot of them have closeout dates that are very early into the next year. And I think that's the nature of the market that we're dealing with. They don't perfectly align to financial years, but obviously we try to budget in financial years. So
do we still have a rollover report of?
Through you, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, the process
Yes.
for managing the budgets in relation to projects that aren't completed at year end is that there's a request for carry forward. And that's assessed, and the budgets are then repositioned into the following year, the amount that's carried forward. So that process is underway now. There'll be a report that comes to council that approves those.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any further questions?
Heath has got a question.
Yes, thank you, Heath.
Thank you, through the chair. Just two quick questions. First one is just anecdotally, I'm hearing in the construction industry that costs are coming back. We're starting to see some cost relief in materials and things like that. Are we seeing any of that coming through our capital projects?
Well,
In any real terms?
to defer that to officers.
I'm not aware, but Tony Avery's here.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not aware of any costs coming back at the moment in terms of those that would maybe, but we're facing ongoing pressures, particularly in the construction market, and we are, to say, concerned about potential impact of the East Coast floods and works and the drag on resources, and that's a bigger risk to us at the moment. But not too much, as far as I'm aware, we're not seeing any real reduction in the cost of
I'm seeing them flatten out, Tony.
don't have enough information, sorry, for that.
Sorry, and one more through, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the age debtors, see they've gone up. So there's a note there that the older stuff's all related to three big development contributions.
Yeah.
That's understandable. Are we actually seeing just any trends that is starting to slip out? Are we seeing the current stuff under pressure? Are we seeing, the smaller end of the market that people are slower to pay and things like that? Is this cost of living crisis starting to flow through?
We've put a lot of emphasis into collecting debt from non-mortgage holders, so that's been successful. I guess with the trends, what we've sort of seen as the last couple of autumn finance reports is where we've got the overdues is generally within residential vacant land. What we've sort of seen now is some more of the commercial or the country dwellings starting to come in as well. So there's probably a little bit of a difference in the trend there.
I've got some comments in that space. The increase overall in terms of receivables it's largely down to timing, but there is an increase in the number of properties that are in arrears for rates. That's not particularly concerning at this point. I think we may see more people under pressure in that space as they refinance their mortgages, but just in terms of context, we've got 449 properties that are in arrears as at 30th of April, and overall we've got over 31,000 rateable units. So that's around 1.4%. That's risen from around 1%. So the numbers are relatively small. We're keeping an eye on it. And as Paddy has said, we've had some success in recovery of debt from those properties that haven't got a mortgage attached to them. So we're working actively in that space. There's nothing too alarming at this point, but it's definitely rising, but not at a rate that we wouldn't expect at this point.
So your provision for doubtful debts hasn't gone up, so we're still comfortable with that.
It may go up slightly at the end of the financial year, but we haven't adjusted it to date.
Thank you very much.
Stu, even though it's only gone from 1 to 1.4, it's more the trend and where it's going to head with mortgages resetting at up to 3 times what people were paying.
Yes.
So I think it's going forward that we need to be concerned, or there may be some concern.
Thank you.
And if I could just make a comment, Mr. Chair, and I guess we're going to see another rates rise in the coming years, so that's going to put a bit more pressure on that space potentially. Correct.
Stuart, there's also a question from Councillor Guy and Councillor Glading.
Okay,
Thank you through the chair. Again, I'd like to add to Councillor Cox's thanks for this excellent report and how useful this would be for all councillors to dive into the detail of. I think it's answered many of our questions of the last couple of weeks. Trying to get down into the detail of it was a full-on learning curve for me. Anyone sitting over my shoulder will see the amount of scribbles everywhere. Commentary point H, 2.3 million increase in intangible amortization. We sort of get into the dictionary to understand what we might be amortizing. Are these assets that don't exist, sort of software trademarks? Yeah. And what do we offset that against? How do we does the 1.9 come in? Because I said we had a 2.3 increase in what we did amortize, and we offset that with 1.9 million. Sorry, I'm on
Page 55.
55 and the commentary, point 8.
On balance sheet, is it?
Yeah, on the balance sheet.
Oh, right, okay, so yeah, so we've got our existing software in there, and then amortization is similar to depreciation, it's just called amortization of intangible assets. So they have a shorter lifespan, so we just amortize that, but we also are buying knowledge management software as well, so that's the increase there. So the amortization comes down, but it's obviously by the increase of
things like T1.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. That's it for me. Thanks. Stuart.
hey, Nikki, yep.
Thanks, Stuart, through the chair. Just a couple. In terms of the 1.2 million below budget for CIP funding, was that just a timing? Was that just because things are delayed?
So again, 1.
What the 1.2 million that we're missing for CIP funding? I was just wondering if that was lost or due to delays. It's just delays. That's great. I was just wondering about the bridge and so on and so forth. Just to comment on as well on the what we're not getting back in terms of rates. I had a look at the country dwelling and kind of did some averaging, and it's sort of a bit of an anomaly. The others are all around sort of 6,000 average per property, but the country dwelling is out sort of 16,000, unless my maths is wrong, per property. So those country dwellings are owing a lot per property, or a lot is sitting on one property and not on the others. But I just wondered if we drilled into that, because it seems to me that when we up value land and the value of these big properties goes up, they might be very big, but they might just have somebody sitting on there who has low cash flow. Do we drill into some of the impacts? Because a 40% rate rise on a high value property is significant, but you may have a retired couple living in it.
The category of the property really doesn't make any difference to the approach we take. With rates collection, the prime method is to go through the mortgagee. So
I'm just in terms of understanding from an empathy perspective and a practical perspective in terms of these people's cash flow. We don't look into that. Okay, that's good to know. I'll follow it up elsewhere. And the last thing was just Queenstown. That's flagged up on page 44, and I know this isn't the risk paper, this is the financial paper, but it just doesn't disclose for the non-councillor members my understanding of the full financial picture and risk picture of Queenstown Three Waters, and I thought it would be useful for this committee to and for the externals to have a better understanding of what's going on with Queenstown Three Waters and the development agreement. So I don't know whether that's a request for a report for the next meeting or whether that would be too far away. I just wonder if Patty can or somebody can speak to that. It might be Mike, I'm not sure.
Or if they haven't got the information to hand, that it could be circulated.
Okay, could we take something offline? Is that what you're suggesting, just from an information point of view?
I think through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, we are obviously in dialogue and negotiation with Kingston around the DA. We've committed to coming back to councillors with a workshop on that. We'd be happy to circulate that to non-council members of the AFRC as by way of background material as well.
That would be really helpful. Appreciate it.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Any other questions or observations? If not, I'll move the noting of the report. We've got a seconder.
With a second.
Lyle, who's that? Is that?
Heath, sorry.
Yep. Okay. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Paddy, sensitive expenditure.
Okay, so the second finance report, so again, another regular finance update. So this is on sensitive expenditure. No major discrepancies to report for this period, and again, happy to take any questions on that.
Open it up to questions.
Do you have one?
So Nikki has a question.
I'm just
Yes.
slow. Sorry, it's navigating the big reports. Thanks
Yes.
through the chair. Just on the on page 73, this is just a nothing, but there's a graph on page 73. Is Win Williams missing from that?
No,
Well,
Bottom of
at the bottom, I thought it should be 11 million, and Win Williams isn't there. So I just thought, you know,
Yes. Well spotted.
worth
yeah.
popping it in. And I had another question on page 65. Sorry, be with me.
65.
Yeah, so just the downward trend in professional services. So as a percentage, it's dropping significantly, and I'm just interested in which component is driving it down. So is it planning? I'm just interested in, is it planning, and are we potentially spending less money, let's get quite specific, on legal fees because we might be mediating more and going to court less, or I don't know, but I'm interested in what's specifically causing that downward trend, and it would be quite useful. Some of the pie charts that explain it, it would be useful to see them over time, like what did they look like in previous years, to see what's causing the downward trend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it is a comparison to the total supplier spend as well. So it is the constructions
Yeah.
figure as well.
Yeah, well, part of it was CapEx, part of it was OpEx, but the OpEx was trending down, and I was wondering what was, or if that was what was driving it.
Trending down, yeah. So legal, the weather tightness, so significant spend as well. So that's.
But that's not helping it trend down. I'm just looking for an explanation because it does.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll attempt.
Oh, thank
With
you.
projects, a lot of the professional spend is upfront, and of course, then as you get into the construction, that becomes a lesser amount of what's being spent because you're into the construction phase.
I was looking specifically at the, it would just be good to see whether it comes from CapEx or OpEx, and if it's from the OpEx section, which part of OpEx is trending down? Where are we not spending as much? Because it's a significant trend.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we can provide that information if it's not evident in the presentation in terms of the basically giving an insight into the type of spend for slide 65 at the time.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Just, thank
Do
you.
that, Paddy, if it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Stuart.
Appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? If not, can I have someone move the contents of the report to note it?
Happy to move.
So Nikki.
Yeah, thank you,
moving.
Nikki. Yep. And seconder?
Heath.
Heath. Thank you, Heath. All those in favour? I carry. Let's move next to health and safety and wellbeing performance. I'll ask Alan, please.
So, Stuart, I'll just get Katie to introduce the people at the table.
Okay, thank you.
Brona, Mr. Chair and Committee. So we have Nicola McKernan, Health and Safety Chair. We also have Alan Thomas, Health and Safety Manager, and myself, Peter Church, Director of People and Capability.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if you're happy, we'll take the report as read and go through to questions.
Okay, open it up to questions.
Lisa, I think, I'm not sure. Yes.
Yes.
Question
thank
from
you,
Lisa.
Chair. Chair. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
To our council staff for this report. I've got a couple of notes on things. My question around reporting of health and safety was probably just looking to see your degree of comfort around near miss reporting, and our culture of just creating that environment where it's safe to report. I couldn't really pick up a lot on near miss in there, and that just raises the question for me: how proactive are we around encouraging that culture where it is safe to report? So that would be my first.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we advocate for a culture of reporting near miss, absolutely. And we have a good culture where people feel comfortable to report near misses as well. And we have a very interactive engagement discussion through the Health and Safety Committee as well. Anything else to add, Alan?
With near miss is the way we look at them as something that has occurred. So we treat it as an incident because we want to look at what's gone on to allow it to get to that sort of near miss stage. So even though we understand near miss, it gets classified as an incident because something has gone wrong to somewhere in the process.
So that's one of the reasons why it's not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you. Probably a question that came back to me through the community associations, just and noting some of our public interaction, and it was regarding access and visibility and mapping of defibrillators that we might have in our communities. And it was raised about, for example, out at the Hackett site where we know there's a defib there, but is it on the outside of the building where we've got particularly a lot of vans and things parking up around different areas out there? And I know that many members of the public are also now starting to say that they'd be willing for there to be community access to defibrillators. I don't know whether that's something we might be able to feedback through our CA networks or just around making more public awareness of what other health and safety tools might be accessible to them in their neighbourhoods. I think Gibbston identified about 6, just on a quick ask around that could be.
I think through you, Mr. Chair, I think through our comms channels and media channels, we'd be more than happy to circulate that material. Often we don't necessarily always know where all the defibrillators are. We know obviously where the ones we install. We know a lot of the ones probably more in the towns, but if there are others around, we can certainly reach out through the community associations to identify those, and then we can publicise those.
Yeah. And probably my last question was around the significant incident with the paragliding and the helicopter incident. And I was just curious as to whether they were in controlled airspace. Had there been a NOTAMs issued in that incident? Are we aware? Or were they in not controlled airspace, or do we not know?
Ken's here, obviously.
Yeah.
Through you, Chair, in regard to the incident, we've been working alongside the Department of Conservation on the investigation. It is a controlled airspace, as you've noted, so we've had to work through the CAA as well as that in terms of that program. We'll be reporting back to the LT and operate through this reporting channel was outlined as part of this committee. The operation was undertaken in wildly controlled spraying of that site as part of the code response to the forest under that area. And we had an misreported. So we had to undertake, because of the aircraft and other aspects of that, a full investigation. DOC has led that, so they are the prime, but it's now it's above our land, so and it's part of a contract operation we've been involved with. So once we've got to the bottom of the investigation, we'll report that.
Yeah, thank you. Just noting that it is such a high use area by our Paragliding community all along that forestry block and up above Crown Range. I know it is controlled use space, so appreciate the investigation that's underway and won't comment further on that, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
That's it
Lisa.
for my questions. Thank you through the chair.
Lyle.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just a question on
Yeah,
page, the graph on page 80, any comment on the increase in number of contractor incidents? And that's not talking huge numbers, but as a, we have any comment on that? I noticed yesterday on the way home from Queenstown, there was a downer vehicle tipped up in the ditch on the Crown Range, and then at the intersection of Golf Course Road and Corona Bay Road at Veolia, you had a collision there, so I guess they'll be reported as, they get reported as workplace incidents of contractors.
If they some are contracts.
Yeah, okay. I just wondered, you got any comment?
Generally,
What do we do about it?
well, generally after the Christmas period, I've found in contracting, it's people coming back into the workplace, and you can end up with lots of smaller incidents as people get back into the flow and you know, the thought process of safety as they come in, and then that usually sort of tails off as people get back into the, you know, that thought process. So I would put it down to that rather than there's not anything serious, as it were.
Okay. No further questions, thank you.
Okay, can I have someone move the noting of the contents of the report? Lisa, you move that?
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Okay. Yes, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Move next to climate and biodiversity plan update. So I'll ask Bill and Kirsty. It's a big report.
It is. Kia ora koutou, katoa to the chair and to the committee members. In fact, look, it's a pleasure today to present to you this overview of year one delivery for the climate and biodiversity plan. I'm happy to take the report as read, but we'll just do a few framing comments if we can at the start, just to set the tone for the report. You'll note that it does provide a summary of our progress over this first year one plan. It's a 3-year plan, and we committed to an ambitious action set of over 62 actions. We're pleased to report 4 of those are completed. We have 56 in progress. 2 have been delayed into the next year, and there's 3 that we have actually started early that were part of year 2 delivery. The report provides a summary of progress against several of these key actions. It also provides a couple of things such as an overview of a model to represent the work that is happening, particularly in terms of the embedding climate action into the council decision making. So the key elements that are associated with an effective approach to carbon emissions management are framed in a model on section 8 that talks about measure, reduce, verify and improve. Now, these are key elements associated with an organisational framework to support the outcomes that we wish to achieve in emissions reduction. I would like to make a special note to all council staff and to partner organisations who have supported with the year one delivery. Their support and their efforts are much appreciated. I'm happy to take the report as read, as I said, and open the floor for any questions.
Open for questions. Nikki.
Thanks through the chair. Thank you so much. It's been awesome. Honestly, I read that report and felt like kind of uplifted. That framework looks awesome, and all the support that we're obviously getting at every stage. I hadn't expected that, and it looks like everything's in hand. Like we're getting somewhere, and the fact that we've done that baseline, really looking forward to that report. Yeah, no, it feels like massive progress, having sort of stepped aside from that kind of reference group, not knowing what's going on, and then you see all of this. So it's great. I'm wondering if this should be reported to councillors somehow, and wondering if we need to make a folder in the OneDrive or something that just puts these reports into for them and sends them an email when they come out with a link saying here it is, just so that councillors stay on top of what's going on, because yeah, it's great progress. Thank you for including elected members in the training around Project Tile. That's much appreciated. It's great to be included, not forgotten. Thinking about the recommendations that are flowing out of the phase 1, and that was on page 92. I just had a question about, does Akina obviously has experience doing this. I'm just wondering how the recommendations will integrate with the other systems that we have, because obviously we have Tech One and we have, you know, is it something that sets aside? Is it something that integrates? And so that when you're doing procurement, what does it all trigger? I can't conceptualize how it all works, and maybe you could speak to, I don't know.
Through the chair, happy to respond. So yes, Project Time has been like a really interesting project to come in and essentially undertake an assessment of where we are in terms of our current state of process. So looking across all directorates of council, so a number of focus groups were managed and coordinated to get a clear understanding about where those decision points are around, you know, where admissions and certainly biodiversity considerations as well can be incorporated into council decision making. So the recommendations do relate to, so I guess, understanding where we are in terms of our process maturity, to look at the recommendations around certain tools, such as both qualitative and quantitative assessments of emissions, also biodiversity assessment that can be incorporated into existing process frameworks. So particularly around investment decision making, looking at where some of those key junctures are where decisions are made as part of council activity. So it is kind of complicated, but we are looking at running a council workshop in the future to kind of start to unpack some of that detail.
Okay, so they will sit within Tech One and within those sorts of.
It may be appropriate hosting place for Tech One for some information, but we've also got process frameworks that are held in other aspects of council systems, and so looking to integrate as much as possible into those.
Awesome. Thank you. And that was really all. I did have one question that's probably not necessarily directly relevant, but it is to the committee in a general way. Just, are there any implications for Glenorchy or even Gorge Road flowing out of the government's decision up north to buy out properties? Is there?
Through the chair again, yes, there's significant implications coming through the new legislation. That is part of the RMA reforms. So the Climate Change Adaptation Act is a key piece of legislation that is under development at the moment in the NFE, and that will set, I guess, the framework to support future planning around managed retreat. Okay, so that is part of that RMA reform. We're still waiting to see the details of that. But there are a number of, I guess, other areas of focus that are coming in as part of the Auckland and Cyclone Gabrielle.
Yeah.
Floods that was had here. So
They're just interested in whether we're going to be at some point, you know, do we need to make provision at some point for buyouts if that's the direction that the government's going, or is that kind of like an isolated thing?
There is a clear difference between what we're seeing as recovery activity from the floods in both Cyclone Gabrielle, and which central government is stepping in, utilising existing funding perhaps to support, versus what we will see with the Climate Change Adaptation Act, which is proactive planning around potential future retreat. And the funding models for those are still under development, so waiting to see.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Lisa or Lyle? Sorry.
Sorry,
Lyle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the trend of emissions. I know you put it down to COVID. I mean, are you confident that that trend's going to, now COVID is still about, but you can't keep blaming COVID. We're going to get on sort out that trend.
Through the chair, agreed, Councillor Cox. So look, what we are doing in the emissions reduction space is starting to take some more clear steps around planning out what the pathway looks like. So we have the ability to incrementally track, I guess, on a monthly basis how we're performing. But certainly when it comes to council's investment and commitment around larger emissions reductions, we will be pulling that information into what we call the emissions reduction plan, which we'll look at next, particularly up to 2030, around what we, I guess, where the potential opportunities for significant step changes in our emissions reduction are.
Yeah, okay. The electricity is an interesting one. I guess that'll come out in your plan too. I suppose what the only way to reduce it is to stop using so much power, I guess.
There is also opportunities around renewable energy certificates to look at, to verify that it is coming from renewable sources. is essentially slightly a form of offsetting, but it does actually allow him to look at electricity usage very much dependent. But we are looking at energy reduction, well, electricity reduction opportunities, such as solar and building efficiency as well.
Okay, the last question, Chair, on page I think 95, it's just down in the noise. Maybe I didn't drill far enough down, but the food resilience program and all the projects and the work stream there, who's actually doing that? Is WOW involved, and you've got people, but who's actually developing the food system, stakeholder register, all this?
Through the chair, so the project is very much a collaboration between council and WOW. So we are I think we're the sole funder for this particular project, but we are looking to support WOW with accessing other co-funding opportunities. So we have initiated the project as a collaboration with WOW. So Julia Blackfoot is the project lead.
Okay.
There is an alignment between council's intent in this space and WOW, as, in terms of the focus areas that they wish to look at. So a number of staff have supported the project. We've supported the HUI, which was run most recently. We're also integrating in with emergency management. So there is a significant disruption lens to this. So what is our food security status for the district? So look, it has been, I think, a very productive project, and this has essentially been phase one to scope out the opportunities and then also essentially the vulnerabilities, which will lead into project two, which is more around setting up a roadmap and a kind of governing structure that can bring together the different stakeholders from across the food system.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr.
If I may just add as well through you, Mr. Chair, one of the things that we are looking at as we move forward is where we can use the strengths of some of our community groups to best effect. We're a very small team of 3 people in this space working, and there's going to be considerable work on the resilience and adaptation side from a local government perspective going forward. So where we can maximise the strengths in the community, particularly in that mitigation space, then we will be doing so and consistently moving towards that as an approach going forward.
Okay, thank
Great.
Is there any chance I
Any
can
further?
Can I ask one more question, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much. Just with the LTP, we've got this McDonald report, and in terms of what we're saying are must-dos in the LTP program, what's the risk that if we don't include reduction along the lines of the trajectory that we've set for ourselves? If we don't include that as a must-do, what are our risks, do you think, down the track? Because at the moment, the LTP, we've not included meeting that trajectory as a must-do. And so at what risk does that put your program of work, if that's not too difficult a question?
Can I defer it
I think that's exactly the question that we need to address with the steering group when we bring the strategic themes to the table, because you'll then have visibility of where that sits, whether it's sitting in the must-do space and how it's actually filtered across a number of different programs that might be recommended that council may choose to lend emphasis and weight to. I think where it comes into the mix, so that the McDonald report that has been done is on the baseline of which year?
It was the last LTP.
It's the last LTP. So it will give some insights and some input into this process, but it will not be run again until we're running the baseline on the next LTP. So there is a bit of a lag here in how we're actually assessing it, but it will give more information for decision making going into this LTP process, that's for sure. Okay, thank you.
Great. Lisa.
Thank you, through the chair, if I may. My questions are around our actions in paragraph 3, the 56 actions. An excellent report. Thank you to all the work, and agree with Councillor Gladding on some of the relief, I suppose, when you read some of these actions. But Councillor Cox brought up the food resilience network project, and many of my questions were there as well around our degree of collaboration. I understand ORC, maybe food mapping the region and things like that. Is there like a talk group regionally around our food resilience picture at all?
Through the chair, I'm pleased to report that will be an output from this project in terms of a group or a committee or a certain structure to support, I guess, ongoing collaborative work in the space. So there is a lot of data, as you note. So OIC have undertaken certain kind of mapping activity. But what we're seeing is this kind of isolated data set. So bringing that together in service of kind of a shared vision around food security and understanding those resilience challenges. That's the intent of that program.
And that excellent report following the survey from WOW, I know there was some definite jaw-dropping moments for me to hear that, you know, in one generation we've gone from being almost 95% reliant and resilient on our local food sources to now holding 7 days of supermarket supply, and then Hercules required every 21 minutes to land. I think strengthens our understanding of the significance of our airport resilience as well. But just another couple of points in those actions. Question around the Beam Scooter partnership. We as councillors get a great report from the Beam Scooters, and I've asked that there might be a public version of that made available, because I think that would go some way to reassuring our community that people are enjoying picking up an e-scooter to go all the way out to Pack and Save. I recently caught up with the manager of the supermarket and checked in, no concerns, and happy how that was operating. I was curious to see the number of rides and how that was being worked. So yeah, keen to understand whether those reports can be more widely shared with our community. And my last question, and fully appreciate the resourcing constraints we're under, how do we see an opportunity to create this internship for a student to come on board around sustainability and climate action? Because being able to grow our own awareness and resource in this space is so critical across all of our human resourcing. Is that a don't have the money or don't have the person to put them with? That's my question on that one. Or both.
Through the chair. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Guy. So I'll respond in two parts. So with regards to the Beam report, look, I think that would certainly make sense. What I will make note of is that soon we'll be looking to release the new Climate Biodiversity Plan website. Now, this is going to be an important opportunity for us to be able to share updates around the progress of actions and also key information updates as well. So that will be an asset, I think, for the organisation, and certainly to share the stories of success and updates. There will be sections on that website that allow that type of information to certainly be shared in a much more, much better way than we are currently at the moment. Second part of your question related to
internship.
Internship, yes, sorry, it's been a long day.
Already?
Certainly that plan is, the action is fully committed to. It has been a resourcing challenge just in the last year to get that around the timing of when an internship would be appropriate. But we are looking at progressing that in the year to look.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I'd just like to thank Bill and Kirsty, and just to pass back to all the people involved that we're thankful for where we're heading and some of the outcomes that are being achieved. So well done.
I appreciate it.
And I know Bill Moran would like to move this particular paper of the noting. We've got a seconder. Yeah, Nikki. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. We move next to the Lakeview update, and I ask Paul Speedy to come forward. Morning, Paul.
Good morning. How are we all doing?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. So Lakeview update. Mr. Chair, it's probably two matters. We've got the usual progress updates with the normal reporting here, and then there's the matter raised by Councillor Glading on the notice motion. Obviously, we've got some updates on the council obligations and how we're progressing there, which is looking like it's moving along well. And and then the developer obligations as well. And then there's been a modification notice provided and an assessment done and an approval of two material modifications last week. And that was arising off the back of the developers changes arising from their consent decision that they went through there. So there was effectively a reduction in their building envelope. So they've made some changes to their feasibility model and some of their activities on the site to enable the fit within that building envelope. But otherwise, take the report as read, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, I'll open it up for questions.
I have a question.
Okay, Nikki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just on thanks, on page 110, there's just some financials are set out, and I just wanted to clarify. It says expected income from property disposal of 88 million. Is that present value, or is that?
They're nominal.
They're nominal. So does that give us an accurate reflection of net surplus? Not being a whiz with numbers, but obviously we've paid, our costs have been up front, and those land payments are going to come in all the way up till 2039. So do you know now, like, have we done a recent assessment of what the present value of those land payments will be?
No, no, we haven't.
Right, okay, thanks. The other thing I just wanted to ask, just basically why the AFRC is being asked to state that the status quo for the delegation is appropriate. Just wondering how that's going to be used. What is the point of the proposed motion?
Oh, sorry.
Is that okay?
Motion.
The recommendation is
Recommendation number 3.
So
Yeah.
I think that that this was referred by staff to the committee, and we took some further advice, which is included that, and I think this is either the committee has a choice to receive that advice and stay silent, or it can express a view in terms of how it sees the delegation being effective or not. Our recommendation is that based on the advice we've received, that remains effective, and we're effectively inviting council to the committee to express that support.
Okay.
Thank you, Guy.
I would like to, while I can foreshadow an alternative motion that I would like to put. And I'd just like to say a few things on this, because it's obviously in relation to the notice of motion that I've brought. Firstly, that notice of motion was brought with Mr. Robertson's report, which is the report that councillors used to make their decision to reaffirm the delegation last year. So that was also attached to the notice of motion, just for clarity. I'd also like to be clear that I'm open to amending that notice of motion to address any information requirements that the council may believe need to be addressed, to bring that to the table. Secondly, I'd just like to speak to process. We all have opinions on the delegation, some of us stronger than others probably, and based on, you know, our philosophical positions and our experience and our knowledge of things. And they're all different around this table, out in the public, around the council table, no doubt. But the merit of motions is decided at the council table. It is not decided before that. We don't decide not to bring a motion because we disagree with the contents. That's for council. And I feel like at the moment we are deliberating over the merits of a motion, and that concerns me. A notice of motion understanding orders can be brought by just 2 councillors. If it's been debated within the last 12 months, it only takes a third of councillors to get it to the table. It can't be declined on merit. So what we've got at the moment is 6 councillors having signed that notice of motion saying that they wanted to have the debate, not necessarily that they agreed with the proposed motion, but that they wanted to have the debate in public and have council make that decision. In the same way that we essentially reaffirmed every other delegation at the start of the year, but this one obviously didn't sit on the delegations register. I also wanted to raise for the committee the issue of risk of poor governance, and that's obviously been raised as a tier 1 risk in the review today. If we're able to delegate power, we have to be able to reconsider that power and to amend or to revoke delegation if we think that's necessary, because obviously we're the ones who are responsible for the decisions that have been made under those delegations. So putting Lakeview aside for a minute and the merits or not of that motion, this is about if we delegate power, can we reclaim it if we need to, you know, under this chief executive or any other chief executive in the future. It's a process issue, and the notice of motion was brought. I believe it was adequate, but if it's not, I'm happy to address the issues within it that need to be corrected in terms of the information requirement. What we're being asked to give today is a specific opinion to support the status quo. There were no options in there, and I'm just intrigued as to why we weren't generally asked to just provide some advice. What we're doing by agreeing the status quo is not adding to councillors' understanding. We're not achieving anything in terms of making better decisions. We're just giving an opinion which will presumably put pressure on councillors. I'm not sure what the purpose was. So what I'd like to do is present an alternative motion that supports good process, that reduces the governance risk, that allows us on any issue to bring a notice or that sets a bit of a precedent around, you know, if we want to bring a notice of motion to the table to reclaim power, then we can, as long as that notice is adequate. And so I do have an alternative notice of motion, and I will send it round to everyone. I don't know that I have a seconder. So I'll just send that to you now. I've got a copy, but I'll just read it out. So the alternative is note the contents of the report. Agree that council staff should work with Councillor Gladden to address the information concerns raised by the Mayor in relation to the 21 June 2023 notice of motion. And agree that the notice of motion should then be placed on the agenda for the 10 August 2023 council meeting, so that the councillors who are responsible for the decisions that are being made can make that call. So I'm going to pass this through, and if we can just have a minute so councillors can have and committee members can have a look at the proposed motion.
So is that being sent to us? I just like it.
I've just sent it through to you, Stuart, but I can read it out again if that helps. So basically, I don't understand the value of agreeing the status quo because it doesn't add anything. But what we can do is support good process by improving the notice of motion that's been put and that is apparently inadequate, and then putting it to the next council meeting. Otherwise, it may not get there because we haven't been able to achieve that so far. And so, look, this committee, I don't think can direct that it goes onto a council agenda, but if we can agree to the status quo, I think it's possible to agree what I'm proposing.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, my comment?
Yes, you may.
Just in respect to that, so the notice of motion is not being debated today. Notice of motion actually has been rejected. So the material, and I think the reference that the committee was asked to look at was the issues raised by the notice of motion, not the notice of motion itself. So we should be really clear about that. It's referred to in here because that's the material that we were given by Councillor Gladding. There's been that second notice of motion, which obviously came after the direction to come to audit finance and risk, and we've acknowledged that there's a further workshop with councillors on that topic, which has been scheduled, I think, for the 19th of August. Is that right? 19th of July. So,
19th of July.
So there is a process for further discussion, and that's been signalled that if council wishes to, as a result of that, it could request the report of staff. But I don't think it's for these two notices of motions have been rejected. They're not live for further debate, it would be for councillor Gladding or any other person to issue a new notice of motion. That actually, and in both instances, the notice of motion were found to be wanting in terms of standing orders. So that's the process that we're in. What the committee was asked to do was to give consideration to the issues that were raised by councillor Gladding, and those specifically related to how delegation was exercised. So I think we're really clear that we're not here to debate the notice of motion.
No, that's understood. So I'll just open it up now for others to have their say.
Oh, okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Nikki, but I see it. But two issues here. You've got the generic issue of notice of motions and the procedure and standing orders and getting things from councillors onto the table. And then we've got the Lakeview delegation. I've read all the information that's, I'm a new back on council. I haven't had all the history of some of the other councillors that are currently on council on this project, but I've read a fair bit in the last few days and the last few weeks, trying to get up to speed. I've read your notice of motion issues or issues raised. I've read the reports from the so-called our consultants or experts, and I meant to raise it in the earlier item. We can bring that up again later about how comfortable we are with the advice given by the professionals, the experts or their consultants. Read all that, taken into account the updated thing from Bruce Robertson, and at the moment I'm comfortable with the way the delegation has been managed. We've all got different views on, to a degree, on material matters and what's happening there. And noting this is a long-term project, but I do believe that we do need to deal with the issue that's raised on the notice of motions in the process. And I think the earlier report on our tier 1 risks and the governance highlighted that. And this whole issue of the handling of these 2 notice of motions has identified that risk of the governance interaction with the staff and getting things onto the council table. And we do need to sort that out. And that, not on this item, but as a risk committee, we do need to take notice of that. Moving forward on this one, and the only thing I put on this is in the report, way down, one of the lawyers on the report thing is Minter Elson on page 155. It was talked about. It gets to the point of information on how this delegation has been used. Are we getting all the information as councillors? And in that recommendation on page 155, it talked about the CEO bringing to a workshop some of the information, taking on board what we'd said. I know we don't make decisions here. It's not debated in public, but at that point we did get a chance to drill down on some of the information. And I think that should be more, become more of a embedded into the process that does happen as we go forward, and not just a one-off thing. So it would be a regular thing for the CEO, the project team to bring to the councillors in a workshop as soon as they get notification of significant or of the changes that are proposed by or asked for by the developer. So that's where I'm sitting at the moment. I just think we need to deal with separately the notice of motion procedure and this item. I'll leave it at that at the moment. I may wish to reserve the right to comment again if someone else raises something that I think I could comment on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Lyle.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Look, Mr. Tillon did say that, we don't have to agree what has been put in front of us in terms of what's been recommended. I'm just intrigued as to what else would be appropriate. We've been asked to specifically say that we agree and to address the matters in the notice of motion. I just don't understand what you're suggesting could be an alternative to that. I've just proposed an alternative, but we seem to be at the whim of staff, and that at the mercy of staff in terms of what we can consider and can't consider and what we can bring to the table and what we can't. And this is the problem, is that we should have the power to bring things to the table, but we just don't seem to have that. And it's a major risk with a delegation. And I'm trying to understand what the intent of the recommendation is. Why are we being asked to agree this? And what would be an acceptable alternative if the alternative I've proposed isn't acceptable?
So Nikki, my view on it is that we've been asked, the matter of the late agreement delegation remains the prerogative of council, so we all agree on that. The Audit and Finance and Risk Committee was an overlay that was a recommendation from Bruce Robertson, and the other parts to that were, and that's reported to us on a 3-monthly basis. On a 6-monthly basis, the governors and the developer get together, and if there's any questions there. And then the thing that I think is very positive is the workshops, where these matters can be debated and fleshed out. And with the first one, oh, sorry, not the first one, but the next one on the 19th of July. So this committee here is, its role is to make sure that the process is being followed. And if we're not happy with that, then certainly as chair, I will raise that with the mayor and councillors if we're not happy as a group with how things are performing. I've got no reason to believe that it's not working as it should and as recommended by Bruce Robertson.
Sorry.
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I see what our role is. That's that we're following process and practice agreed by council, and obviously it reflects a lot of things that have been done since Bruce Robertson's reported. I think in terms of the question of changing or withdrawing delegations, that should be a matter of general policy rather than specific to individual delegations. So the delegation policy should cover situations where things are delegated to the CE or others in council management and the conditions on which they may be withdrawn. So I don't see the specific matter being a basis for actually opening up that. I think it should be a matter of general policy in terms of the delegation policy itself. I think that would be standard practice rather than trying to create conditions specific to a delegation, say to Lakeview. I think, you know, our policy should be sort of permissive, but also prescriptive around the conditions of which delegations may be withdrawn or reviewed by council. So it shouldn't mean that you're making ad hoc decisions about withdrawing delegations. Should be a matter of general policy.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could make some comments and ask some questions.
Yes, far away.
Thank you. So just for clarity, a little bit of background, just to sort of get some understanding around the delegation. So under the development agreement, the council has some responsibilities and the developer has some responsibilities. Just clarify for me, the council's responsibilities are to get the sections to title and hand over ownership. Is that right?
Yeah. But there's some administration of the DA going forward in terms of
but in these instances to put these sections into titles and hand them over to the developer to build something hopefully good and that meets the objectives of the agreement. So as far as our risk and as far as the decisions that need to be made under the delegation to bring those sections to title, look, for me, I don't really see, and correct me if I'm wrong, why the risks involved in making decisions around that would need full council input at a political level. So that's one thing. I mean, what are the nature of those decisions that need to be made? Material modifications, etc., etc.
So the material model. So there's two parts to what the council does. So one is, you're absolutely right, our fundamental job is to bring the sections to the point where title can be issued, and then the development that triggers the development process, and that's something that we manage through the organisation and report to council, and that's reports in here. The second aspect is when council entered the agreement, it set a number of project outcomes and material outcomes, and that was designed to, I think, reflect that the council wanted to achieve something, so therefore it made a decision that it wasn't after every last dollar out of the Lakeview site. So it agreed that what it wanted was to achieve some outcomes. It provided, and within that, it needs to recognise that this is a multi-year billion-dollar development that by nature of any development is going to morph and change and evolve. But it wanted to make sure that it was overall consistent with the direction it set. So it set up a series of triggers that it would be measured against. Some of them are measured stage by stage, some of them are measured over the life of the development program, and they fall into these modification processes. Where some of those modifications fall outside the parameters, they're considered material. And council has the opportunity, and council delegated to the chief executive the ability to make those decisions about whether those material changes, which are material, are inconsistent or undermining the project outcome or the material outcomes. So that's the role that the delegation exercises. That's the material that was recently approved and is the process that is subject to having expert, I suppose, advice to us from our lawyers, our commercial managers and our design managers to say, are we still heading along the pathway that the council has spelled out?
So, yeah, I've got one, I mean, in terms of risk and the transfer of risk, if you want full control, you effectively take on full risk. If you want to transfer the risk over to another party, which effectively we're on the cusp of right now, at the moment we're the ones putting up the capital, a lot of the capital, and we've got to deliver the title. Very soon, once we've done our bit in terms of that, there'll be a transfer of risk onto the developer. They, in some ways, get to take on the control because they're the ones who effectively have got a train of or a pipeline of work up to $1 billion worth of capital investment. We have retained some control, but that control is limited under the development agreement, which was negotiated at the time. So the second part, yes, we have some control, but it's not complete control.
Okay, so I'm comfortable with that, and I was privileged enough to sit around the council table for the last triennium, so I'm up to speed with that. And as far as financial risk, so financial risk only sort of really extends to the delivery of those titles, more or less. I mean, it will beyond past that. And unfortunately, we've seen the budget blow out from what it was through some understandable reasons. There's been scope creep, there's been asbestos that was found, and there's just been an increase in costs. So I'm pretty comfortable with all that. The next point that I'd like to make is we just went through this whole thing at the same time last year, didn't we? I don't quite understand how we went through as a council, as the last triennium council, and made a decision that the delegation was appropriate. And I don't know what's changed from then to now. That's probably why I don't quite understand why there's been two other notice of motions for well, more or less identically to what we as the last council went through. Do you think you've got different councillors that see it differently this time? Is it more political this time around?
Speak to that. So in terms of the returning councillors, of the 5 of them, 3 did not vote to retain the delegation as it was last year. So you have a majority of returning councillors who wanted change. We also have 7 new councillors. We also re-agreed every other delegation that sits on the delegations register, and that's a matter for, we have to do that. That's a statutory requirement to re-agree the delegations at the start of the term. We didn't reconsider this one because it doesn't sit on the delegations register. When we had the debate with Mr. Robertson, if you watch the video back from that July 8 meeting, he was asked a question by Councillor Lewis at the time, and he asked whether this should be revisited by the next council, and Mr. Robertson said, yes, it could be. So there's nothing to stop that. The point is here, not the merits of the motion, not whether the development agreement is being executed. The issue here is how do councillors get this to the table so that they can agree that the delegation is correct as is or needs to be amended. That is the issue. That is the governance risk. We're sitting in the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, and we should be looking at what is the governance risk of a delegation debate being blocked by the mayor and staff. That's the issue.
I don't think that using the word blocked is correct. The notice was rejected, and it's a decision of the mayor. So I think the suggestion that this is actively being blocked, I think, is unfair. In 2 instances, the mayor has made that decision, and he's entitled to understanding orders, and he's directed pathways for the matter, the issues to be considered. Firstly, through this committee, and with the second notice of motion through a full workshop of the full council, which will give everybody an opportunity to understand the history, the background, the delegations. At that point, I think the mayor has signalled he's quite open to council signalling if it wants to bring the item back to council for full debate. Nothing's actually being prevented from happening through this process.
And has been prevented because we need to make that decision in a timely way. We don't decide that notices come to the table because the majority or a majority of councillors agrees in a workshop, or because the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee thinks it should or shouldn't. This is a matter for councillors. There's a process, and that notice of motion process is key to protecting local democracy. We should be able to bring this to the table. And when I presented it the first time, they got legal advice. I went through that legal advice. I addressed all the paragraphs in the Minter Ellison Rudd-Watts advice, and I amended the notice to address them. I also suggested that the other ground on which it was refused was incorrect, and apparently it was, because that wasn't used again. But the information ground was again put to us. So, and then when I presented it the second time, they didn't outline for me what was wrong. There was no suggestion that we could work together to improve it, because if they told me what was wrong with it, I could have fixed it. So this is preventing us from getting the debate to the table. And the mayor has said publicly that he does not want the matter relitigated. And so there is no way for us to get this past him. And so we can never get a notice of motion to the table on this. And it potentially applies to, you know, another delegation issue as well, or a notice of motion on another issue. This is a risk. It's a governance risk, and I think the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee need to be aware of it and understand what they're doing when they agree that the status quo is fine, if they do.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Yeah, so look, we're not going to solve the debate for the council at this meeting. As I set out earlier, I'm comfortable with what this committee has been tasked to carry out in our reporting lines. I believe that what has been put in place with reporting to this committee, the 6 monthly meetings with the developer and the workshops. So from my perspective, this process for this committee, I've got no issue, and I haven't seen anything that I should be concerned about. So that debate that you're talking about is going to be held at council level, not at this level. Now, you've got a motion that you wanted to put forward, or amend a motion here. Is there a seconder for that motion?
So do you want to start to read that out again?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
So this is a foreshadow. So this effectively, if it's adopted, becomes the motion of the council, because the motion is not on the table at this point. The report. You
mean the motion of this committee?
Motion, yeah. So what I think Council Gladding has signalled as a proposed motion. So we're looking for a seconder to this, which is to note the contents of the report. 1, 2, agree that council should work with council staff should work with Councillor Gladding to address the information and concerns raised by the mayor in relation to the 21 June 23 notice of motion. Agree that the notice of motion should be placed on the agenda for the 10 August 23 council meeting.
So have we got a seconder for that motion? If there's no seconder, then the motion lapses and we go back to the original motion, or noting in agreement as set out. Okay, well, I'll move that we note the contents of the report, 2, note and we've considered the matters raised in the notice of motion by Councillor Gladding. Agree that while the matter of the Lakeview Development Agreement delegation remains the prerogative of the Council, the Audit and Finance Risk Committee is satisfied that the delegation to the Chief Executive is appropriate. And 4, note the following: a further notice of motion submitted by Councillor Gladding. Elected members intend to hold a workshop on the Lakeview Development Agreement delegation to the Chief Executive. So I'll move. You got a seconder for those 4 items?
Yep, I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. All those in favour?
Chair, Mr. Chair, so can I just ask
Yes.
a question before you put it to the vote?
Yes.
I just want to get just a wee bit of a response from the CEO on, you've mentioned, I've mentioned it, was mentioned by the legal report about workshops. What is your intention then with the suggestion of ongoing workshops for the Lakeview, any changes? You got a comment on that? We could.
I think as I've done by way of practice in the past, I think I'm comfortable to continue with that, which is, I will, as long as I hold the delegation, I will exercise the delegation. I'm always happy to come to council and brief them on what the changes and material modifications are to get feedback. And there's been at least 2 instances where I've done that. So I'm happy to continue that as a sort of a practice note.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favour? Aye,
Again.
carried. Yeah, thank you. And Nikki, you will record your vote against.
Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you. Right, moving to privacy update. And I ask Neil Crosby-Roy, Brendan, Ryan, and Katie. And Katie's going to be presenting.
Hi, hello again. So we have Now here, with also Brendan, and so we don't have Ryan, the Chief Information Officer as well. Mr. Chair, if you're comfortable that we take the report as read and open to questions.
Yes, happy for it to be taken as read, and I'll open it up for questions. Or have you got any items you would like to expand on, Katie?
So items from a people perspective is that we are focusing on building the capability and knowledge through learning and development and training for the team. So that's been a focus for us.
Okay, questions?
Mr. Chair, just a question on page 166, paragraph 8. The last sentence in the first paragraph, therefore QLDC may need to provide contact details. I find that a surprise. Is that, can you explain that a bit more?
Absolutely. Through the chair, if you're comfortable for me to answer.
Yes. Yep.
So we're working through the NTU, which is the National Transition Unit.
Yep.
So the bill that was passed through in December, basically regarding the Principle 11 of the Privacy Act, it permitted for organisations to share information relating to people's personal information according to the Entity Act. So basically we have to share the information that's requested by NTU of people's personal information related.
So that's, I suppose that's to enable the entity, this thing to have all the information that they can send, I guess, bills to those people.
And this related to people, as in the organisation related to.
This
relates to the organisation.
This relates to recruitment of staff.
Ah.
Advice to staff who are affected by the potential shift of that function to a new entity.
Okay, so it's not, we're talking, okay, we're not talking general public.
No, no,
Right.
you're safe.
I misread that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
The big thing to me is that it's when it needs to be elevated to the privacy commissioner. So our obligations there and because there are consequences with the new legislation that we need to report, and if we don't, there are financial penalties.
I'm through you, Mr. Chairman, happy to respond to that. Our general approach when we have any sort of privacy inquiry or potential breach is to consult with the Privacy Commissioner in the first place. So they tend to be one of the first conversations that we have to talk through their view on whether there's actually a potential breach or an actual breach. So we do tend to take their advice. They're reasonably clear in their advice on their website as well as to when something should be notified. So we do tend to take an approach of, if in doubt, notify. And then.
Yeah, that's great. Yep. Any further questions?
Good.
Maybe just one, if I can, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the right forum for it. But there was a decision to implement CCTV in Milwaukee not long ago, and there was a sort of a skip on the considerations under the Privacy Act and the process around that. And sort of on top of that, we're looking at facial recognition becoming a thing potentially. I'm just wondering, how's the training on that? And are we keeping up with the technology and our suppliers and what their tech does and so on, or is this the wrong forum for that? Might be.
We've got a CCTV policy.
Yeah.
So it needs to be addressed by that.
Okay, thank you.
We are doing some work on that to report back to council on that. But I do understand we're not applying any facial recognition. There's no suggestion that we ever have, but there's no intention to use facial recognition.
The police use the CCTV footage, may not be facial recognition, but it's a way to identify people who are having punch ups and that on the streets. So that, I guess that's all legal.
Yeah, we don't specifically enable facial recognition.
Okay.
That's not what we use, and police still have to request that information from us.
Okay.
Okay, any further questions? If not, can I have someone move the noting of the contents of the report?
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Lyle. And seconded, Lisa? Yeah, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. I'll now move that the public be excluded from the non-public section, please. We've got a seconder? Is that Nicky, I see? Nicky, yep, thank you. All those in favour? Carried.